did.
This is the first one.
Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. Usually we need a 5 or 6 second delay, but 20 seconds. That covers me. Thursday, Bruce. Cooking on Thursday. Stay as far out of the kitchen as you can.
You don't even have to ask that.
I'll play poker with you sometime.
Yeah. Yeah, good idea, because I can't.
Water.
There you go.
Hour being 7:12 PM on Monday, November 22nd, 2021. I'd like to call to order City Council meeting for the City of Laconia. Prior to beginning our meeting, I'd ask Councilor Littman to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilor Littman. We're joined this evening at Council table by our recording secretary, City Clerk Cheryl Hebert, and I'd ask her to please call the roll.
Counselor Cheney,
Here.
Counselor Susie,
Here.
Counselor Littman.
Here.
Counselor Haynes is not here. Counselor Hamel.
Here.
Counselor Felch,
Here.
Mayor Hosmer.
Here, thank you. Just for those maybe viewing online, Councilor Haynes is not with us, but our thoughts are certainly with him at this moment. And I'm asking at some point tonight, I'll be stepping out or be recusing myself on a matter. I'd ask Councilor Hamel to stand in as Mayor Pro Tem this evening for that matter. Thank you. We're also joined this evening by City Manager Scott Myers and Finance Director Glenn Smith, helping us on the IT end of things as well. On our agenda this evening, item number 7, which is acceptance of minutes from previous meetings. The regular meeting minutes of November 8th, 2021 were distributed to the City Council on Wednesday, November 10th, 2021. With no corrections or changes submitted to the clerk, the minutes will be accepted as distributed. Moving on to item number 9, which is citizens' comments for matters not on the agenda. If anyone in the audience this evening or online would like to comment or make a comment on any matters, now would be the appropriate time. Any matters not on the agenda.
The whale is raised his hand.
Thank you for joining us, Mr. Diwali. How are you?
I'm doing well, Mr. Mayor. How about yourself?
I'm doing fine, thanks. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Glad to be here. I just wanted to test this out more than anything. Last meeting, it didn't work. So are we speaking on Colonial Plantation now, or will you have a?
That's item number 22D on our agenda. So if you're commenting on that, now would not be the appropriate time, but apparently our IT department has got everything squared away for you this evening.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you in a few minutes.
Okay. Thanks. Moving along to item number 11, which is nominations and appointments. Our first person here is Robert Harrington, who's seeking appointment as an alternate member of the Conservation Commission. Right now, I'll be looking for a motion to appoint Mr. Harrington as an alternate member of the Conservation Commission to a 3-year term expiring at the end of August 2024. So made by Councilor Susie, seconded by Councilor Hamel. Any further discussion on Mr. Harrington's motion, the motion for Mr. Harrington? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand by indicating your support. That's 5 votes in favor. Congratulations, Mr. Harrington, and thank you very much. Moving along right now to item number 13, which is public hearings. Under item 13A, B, and C, which all have to do with CDBG matters. I just open up. I'd ask Donna Lane to join us, and I'll open the meeting, but we'll have you take over in 1 second. Community Development Block Grant CDBG funds are available to municipalities through the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority. Up to $500,000 annually is available for economic development projects. up to $500,000 for housing projects, up to $500,000 for public facility projects, up to $500,000 in emergency funds, up to $25,000 per planning study grant, and up to $1 million available for each housing project under the CDBG CV allocation due to COVID-19. Up to $500,000 was available for CDBG COVID services. All projects must directly benefit a majority of low and moderate income persons. So at 7:17 p.m., I'd like to open the public hearing on item number 13A on our agenda. Ms. Lane, welcome. You could introduce yourself for the record and
Hi, Donna Lane, CDBG consultant, and you know I have to read to you. I apologize for that. So the first public hearing is on the Housing and Community Development Plan. The Housing and Community Development Plan outlines goals for the next 3 years. CDBG requires a Housing and Community Development Plan that is no older than 3 years. Your last Housing and Community Development Plan was 2017, so it's time. The proposed updated plan includes the same goals as the previous plan, which here's your goals. Encourage a varied stock of safe, sanitary, decent, affordable housing for persons of all age and income groups. Encourage economic development activities to increase quality industrial and commercial development. Encourage the expansion and retention of employment opportunities for residents. Encourage municipal and private water and wastewater systems that are safe, sanitary, and meet DES regulations. Preserve and promote the city's historically and culturally significant structures, promote activities that protect the health and safety of the residents and visitors. So the new format's a little bit different than our previous ones because the CDBG has added on the federal goals and the state goals, which the federal goals are like primarily low and moderate income benefits and health and safety issues, and then the state goals as well. And then there's also a CDBG participation plan for citizens. And basically that comes along, and we've always been doing that, but now it's in written format. It says we have to have the public hearing before we ask for CDBG funds, and we have to have a public hearing during a project. It's just outlined now instead of it being just a requirement, it's actually written out. So that's what's on the Housing Community Development Plan. No big changes, but we have to update it. Any questions or comments? I think y'all have a copy.
we do. It's always nice to have you read to us as well.
I know.
So
I'm gonna keep reading to you.
I know,
Don't fall
I
asleep
know.
yet.
No.
Mhm.
So we'll just pause for any, is there any further public comment on this matter?
None from our online attendees, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so at this time, I'd like to close the public hearing at 7:20 p.m. Moving on to item number 13B, which is public hearing on the progress of the CDBG COVID project that provides funding to service providing sub-applicants for costs in preparing for, responding to, or recovering from COVID-19. I can turn it over to you right away, I guess.
Yeah,
Welcome again.
make me earn my keep. So we had applied for CDBG COVID funding before for some service organizations and the city of Laconia for, as you said, for dealing with COVID, preparing for, responding to, and recovering from COVID. And these are for services, not for like no construction. It's just for services. Okay, so our participating organizations are the city of Laconia, Lakes Region Community Developers, Society of St. Vincent de Paul, Belknap House, Community Action Program, and possibly Isaiah Cafe. To date, $71,000 of the $370,000 grants has been spent primarily on staffing, a van, emergency assistance, and administration. Currently, the projects have until June of 22 to spend their money. Maybe we'll have an extension out yet. So if you'd like me to go through and tell you how much they've been awarded and how much they've spent, yes?
Sure.
It's pretty quick. So the city of Laconia was funded for hotels for the homeless, and they were awarded 96,000. So far, they've spent about 5,000. They're going to serve about 400 people, of which 400 should be LMI, low and moderate income, sorry. Lakes Region Community Developers got money for staffing. That should be about 90,000. They've spent about 24,000. They're going to serve about 170 folks, all of which will be low and moderate income. Community Action Program got money for kitchens, equipment, and staffing. $20,000 they were awarded. They haven't spent any money to date. Expected to serve 55 people, of which at least 28 will be low and moderate income. Belknap House, they bought a van. Isn't that nice? So they got money for a van and for cleaning. Out of their 49,000, they've spent 26,000. They're going to serve 136 people, all of which will be low and moderate income. Vincent St. Paul got emergency assistance funding. So they've been awarded 36,000. They've spent about 4,000. They expect to serve 250, all of which will be low and moderate income. And Isaiah Cafe, which we're not sure is participating or not, but they were awarded 52,000 for hotel cafe costs, emergency assistance, and they haven't spent any. They're expected to, if they do participate, serve 165 people, of which at least 84 would be low and moderate income. And then there's some admin costs.
Admin costs of $10,830 actually
Has
paid to
been
date
spent,
out
yeah.
of 25,000
Yeah.
awarded. Okay. I think I neglected to indicate that I opened the public hearing at 7:21 PM. So thank you. And any public comment on this matter? Anything online, Mr. Smith? So I'd like to close the public hearing on this matter at 7:23 PM. I'd like to move on to item number 13C, which is a public hearing on the progress of the Laconia Housing Authority's Sunrise Towers project. I'd like to open that hearing at 7:23 PM. And Ms. Lane, if you can lead us through that, it'd be great.
The Laconia Housing Authority's project includes balcony door replacement, energy improvements at Sunrise Towers, which is 25 Union Ave. It also includes renovations between Sunrise Towers and Sunrise House, which is 423 South Main Street, to improve accessibilities between the buildings. Any energy improvements have been completed. The replacement balcony doors are up on order, isn't everything. They're due in January. Our fingers crossed. They will hopefully be here, and then they'll start going in. Okay, so they also are doing the exterior work. So the walkway and wall renovations are under construction. Again, we're waiting for some materials there, and once those get there, it'll be a pretty quick work to do, and it's just going to make both buildings accessible to each other for folks in wheelchairs. It'll just be easier, and some other things out there. And then they have energy enhancement items that have been done already. It goes into very details, right, Tom? You're quite detailed on exactly what's happening with each thing, but I think that summarizes it all for you.
Terrific. Thanks very much.
And
Any other
Tom's
public?
here if y'all want to see him.
Hello, welcome. Any other public comment on this matter right now, either in present or online?
No online attendees this evening to speak.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Elaine. I'll close the public hearing at 7:25 PM on that matter.
Thank you. So do we only have the motion that whenever you do it for the housing community development plan, the progress don't need any motions on it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Donna.
Moving along to agenda item 13D, public hearing on resolution 2021-18 pertaining to establishing Plantation and Colonial Roads as emergency lanes. Notice of the public hearing was made available on Wednesday, November 10th, 2021 edition of the Laconia Daily Sun, posted at City Hall, Laconia Public Library, Community Center, and in the SAU. The fiscal impact on this matter indicates that as Public Works has since the late 70s been plowing and grading these two roads to the city's current standards for maintaining emergency lanes, the city will not have any additional costs as a result of this declaration. Action on this item may be taken up under unfinished business. I'd like to open the public hearing at 7:26 PM. Anyone present in the chamber or online, now would be the appropriate time to speak if you would like to.
Online.
That was actually item number 13E, not 13D.
All right, we can go back to it.
Hey, we have two online attendees.
Okay,
They're-
Diwali, terrific.
Raise their hand again.
Welcome again, John.
Good evening. I just was walking up the stairs here for a second. Did you open the meeting to public comment?
Yes, I did.
Okay, great. Wanted to touch a base on a few things here. It appears that we're having this meeting today because the protocol wasn't followed at the last meeting when we looked to do the emergency lane, but let's back up a little bit before that. As you know, I sent you and Counselor Felch an email, and in that email, it contained the letter in 1998 that addressed the two roads we're speaking about, Plantation and Colonial, as public roads by definition. It was in the last meeting that we held that that it was opened to accept the roads as is, which didn't meet favorable representation. But we never asked for that vote to be had. We never asked for the emergency lane at this point. The only thing that we did is we brought that letter to your attention to be recognized that the roads by definition, not by city council vote, as was stated in the meeting, but simply by definition met that of a public roadway. And that ends all conversation on this. I know one of the counselors said that, they didn't vote on it, so it's not void, and it was quickly tossed aside, but we can't go back on that. It's 23 years later, and it's been that way ever since. So to simply say that it's void and not give any credit to the letter or to the fact that we've been doing this for over 50 years now, as you just read in your in the notes, I don't know what to think of that. It's obvious that the city is trying to get out of some responsibility that they have to the taxpayers that live in that area. And furthermore, there was gross speculation on the costs that the EPA might enforce on the city to do those roads over. And Mr. Allen has commented a number of times that this is not about the money, where clearly it's about the money. So what we're asking here is to simply keep things the way that they were going or have been going for 50 years. You've heard a lot of people make a lot of good points about it. They've called the city hall, and they've been told it's a public road for years, and now we have a letter to back it up, which you folks just want to put in the circle file and get rid of it. We're trying to work on this with you, but by simply moving ahead in a fashion that isn't supported by anyone who lives on that road or in the area of the two roads, the abutters, simply isn't what we're asking for. And there's another counselor sitting to the left of Mr. Allen who was at the meeting that we held on a Saturday, and he said over and over and over again, I'm here to help you. But it seems like if you're there to help us, you're not listening to what we're saying. And we understand that the emergency lane is perhaps a way to extend some of the public services for a defined period of time, but that's not simply what we're asking for. We're asking you to honor the letter that came out in 1998. We're not even asking, we're demanding it, because that's the way that it's been for over 50 years, again, as the city has admitted. And as we look into this, we did a public records request to get the information of what's going on, and that was just simply incomplete. And it seems to me at this point that's going to take a discovery process from an attorney to get all that information, which would again help us reestablish the fact that this is not a private road and this is a public road. We go back to the money side of things, where it was simply just speculatory numbers and what ifs, and everyone wanted to walk away from it, everyone being the counselors, walk away from this based on those speculatory numbers and what ifs. In my line of work, there's no such thing as what ifs. And it's the same for everybody. We also talked about if there were to come, to other things that come up with the road that the town needed to do, having them as public roads opens the doors to state funding versus trying to make it a private road. So, with all these things considered, we just need to go back to the way things are and take the letter from 1998 for what it is, and move on at this point. We can't keep going back and forth. You said the city wants to work with us, but then you go ahead and you send more letters to residents. At this point, you've kind of cornered everybody into a state of unknown. And, that if someone wants to move away now and get away from this, they can't because of what the city has done. So, that meeting, the last meeting we had, obviously didn't follow proper protocol, the public hearing. So that's why we're having this meeting today. So the letter that was sent out last week to everybody, that should be redacted at this point or retracted because that protocol wasn't followed. So that was put out prematurely. So this seems like we turned this into a mess real quick. And by we, I mean the city. So we need to straighten this out. And I don't think this item on the agenda tonight properly addresses what the concerns are of the residents, as Mr. Allen and Mr. Anderson heard a few weeks ago.
Thank you very much, Mr. DeBali. Anyone else looking to make a comment this evening?
Mayor Joy Sabato has raised her hand.
Mr. Sabato, thank you for joining us. Try to keep comments to 3 minutes or thereabouts.
Did you read my letter I sent you earlier today? I
did.
think I could read it in under 3 minutes, I hope. But I would like to be heard and have it on record. And yeah, I'm Joyce Sabato. I first bought a home with Jack Marizio in 1998 on 102 Plantation because of time spent on Plantation through the 1980s. From back then, during all that time, the city of Laconia had always fully maintained the roads. Then in 2001, we went on and purchased another plot of land. And I must make mention to the comments that were also publicized that present ownership of the streets is clear, as it certainly is not. Our attorney had assured us the fee of the roads in the development were not conveyed in our deed. So in 2001, Jeanette Marizio and I purchased this tract of land from Inverness Associates, who in 1987 had purchased it from Sheldon Corp., who was the developer at the time, and that subdivision had been deemed null and void in 1974, with no further sale of individual lots allowed. I'd now like to note that Sheldon Corp. In 2007, evidently unlawfully by city standards, sold several more lots, presenting the question of why the road issue wasn't solved by the city with Sheldon Corp. Then. I could continue on with many other points and pertinent arguments and information, only some of which has been heard during the 2 meetings at the Weirs Community Center with Wes Anderson and Scott Myers, where we believe we've been misled. But most importantly, I'd like to state that these streets have been fully maintained and repaired by the city of Laconia year-round, including trash collection since the 1970s, which by any calculation amounts to 50 years. I'd also like to point out that New Hampshire State Department of Transportation and has traffic signs, numerous no parking signs posted on both Plantation and Colonial streets. Having these posted signs indicates proof that these roads are deemed public roads. There was no authorization by anybody to put up signs. We're evidently a public road all along since 1998 in the memo. But having these posted signs indicates proof that they're deemed public roads. Photos of the signs are available, and they could also be readily viewed on Google Maps Street View, currently dated at June 2015. Uncannily, after 20 plus years of having these signs, the city came and removed them approximately 2 years ago, about the time this public-private road issue came up, which is very unusual. But trying to now label us as a private road is inaccurate. It's also inaccurate even as a Class 6 road regarding the city's history of maintaining these roads, because by definition, the Class 6 roads are all other existing public ways. If it's cited the document, please read that trying to regard these roads as Class 6 goes against the New Hampshire State Highways classification system defined in RSA 229:5, quoting, Class 6 roads includes those that have not been discontinued subject to gates and bars, as well as those that have not been maintained and repaired by the town in suitable condition for travel for 5 successive years or more. Again, the city has fully maintained our roads since the 1970s. But most relevant is the next document, which is the legal question and answer about stop plowing the private road, noting that 2007, the New Hampshire Supreme Court ruled Hirsch versus Polonsky that municipal highways aren't just created by formal vote or formal mechanism called dedication and acceptance. Municipal highways can be created because the town does something to the road once it's built, meaning the dedication and acceptance is implied. Helpfully, the Supreme Court listed a number of the actions. And, it's repairing, removing snow, doing any of those things that it's often implied the acceptance has occurred through the municipality taking some action to transfer municipal resources to the private road. This acceptance has been applied by the city of Laconia from fully maintaining Plantation and Colonial since the 70s, verified in the document that we all have, John mentioned too. It's the 1998 memo clarifying that for the past 25 plus or minus years, DPW has plowed and maintained both Plantation and Colonial roads, and by definition have public status. So this, I want to make mention that this document was noticeably omitted along with some other relevant items from, it's in August 23rd, 2021. It was the summary of the history of Plantation and Colonial presented by Wesley Anderson. The property owners have been misled by Public Works Director Wesley Anderson and City Manager Scott Myers since our first meeting in 2019. They've tried to walk back and remove history on the inadequate code enforcement, past lack of responsibility, and currently are trying to burden the property owners and virtually strip us of the value in our properties and in our neighborhood. It is totally unacceptable to vote to downgrade our historical city services to emergency lanes for the next 3 years. It is now time to vote to accept these roads as is, which has already been implied by the city's actions.
So ma'am,
Avoiding-
I'm going to have you wrap up right now. We're about 5 minutes into this, okay?
Okay, I have 2 more lines. Avoiding any future arguments, litigation, additional stress, anxiety, and worry that will no longer have any value in our properties by the unnecessary hardship burden onto us by what has been and clearly is the city's responsibility. Thank you for your time. I'm sorry I went over.
Any further online interest in speaking to this matter, Mr. Smith? All right. I'd like to close the public hearing on this matter at 7:39 PM. Going back to item number 13D, which is public hearing on resolution, public hearing on ordinance 2021-149-14 to amend City Code 149-14 ambulance fees. Notice of this public hearing was made available Wednesday, November 10th, in Laconia Daily Sun, posted at City Hall, Laconia Public Library, Community Center, and the SAU. Action on this item may be taken up under unfinished business. So I'd like to open the public hearing right now at 7:39 PM. If anyone would like to speak to that matter, either here in person in the chambers or online, please indicate by raising your hand or virtually or otherwise.
No online attendees seeking to speak.
I'd like to close public hearing at 7:40 PM on this matter. Moving right along, I'll forsake the mayor's report this evening and turn it over to council comments, councilor comments. Councilor Cheney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank the manager for his email regarding my questions on how we were dealing with COVID employees who are being sent home because they've been exposed. I never questioned that the city was following all state and federal guidelines. I'm hoping that we can have some local guidelines that go a little farther. One of the paragraphs the manager sent us said, if someone needs to quarantine and their job provides them the ability to work from home, we make those accommodations. Not every job allows an employee to work from home. I think it's safe to say public safety employees can't work from home. And they're losing bonus time because they're using their sick leave for time we sent them home for. And I just would ask if the manager could review this and suggest to the council a way to not abuse those employees who are vaccinated, willing to work, but can't work because we've sent them home, that they not lose their bonus time, as the employees who can work from home don't lose any time. So that's my first item. I'm hoping he can give us some comment in the ensuing weeks.
Would you like to address that, Mr. Myers, before we go on to the second one?
I would. Thank
Okay.
you, Mr. Mayor. And I know you've all seen the email. And I know Councilor Cheney didn't mean we are abusing our employees, because that's something we don't do. We follow a number of guidelines that put out there. And I think I mentioned the last meeting that anybody who is fully vaccinated is not required to quarantine and take time off because of a close contact. If they meet that criteria, as is within the state guideline right now, they continue to work and they self-monitor. And if they become symptomatic, then they would take the appropriate steps. It is strictly for people who are not vaccinated, who need to follow the state guidelines and do that. And I've said before, with choices that people make, there are consequences. And I agree that public safety, for the most part, can't work from home. But we have gone, I believe, taken every available opportunity for our employees since COVID began, including extending the family medical leave beyond when the federal program expired last December. This council has supported the stipend that was paid to all first responders for 12 weeks at, I believe, $300 a week, in addition to their regular pay. We worked with Primex, our workers' compensation carrier, early on when there was exposures, and this was pre-vaccine vaccination time, to support folks that didn't lose days. We even put up emergency shelter in hotels for staff in some cases so that they were able to stay separate from their family. For those who are vaccinated, again, there is no required loss of time unless they become symptomatic. And I feel overall the city has done a very good job, all departments, of maintaining not only employee health, but public health. I reviewed this with HR. We reviewed it with, I reviewed it with Glenn, who helps us publish our guidelines on these types of things. All the way along, we've been very consistent. So if there's council consensus that you would like me to go back and revisit how we do this, my recommendation would be no, but I don't want to spin wheels if the majority of the council supports the position we've taken. I don't know how with COVID that people can self-identify where they may have come in contact with it, any different than the flu, any different than MRSA, anywhere else. I think it's a dangerous precedent to be setting that anytime somebody feels they need to quarantine while they're waiting on a test response, or in the case if they're not vaccinated and we know it's an identifiable close contact, that we require them to do that. I think that's opens up the door for a number of claims for years to come. So if there's consensus, I'm happy to review it and present an alternative. But I think this is really an administrative decision, and we've been consistent with this, and I would look to see what the will of the council is on this.
If I might, I hearing what the manager said, I'd ask for an opportunity for me to go back and check my facts, because what the manager has outlined here is not exactly how I understood it. And that may be my fault, but I'd like an opportunity to look at that, and I'll report back at the next meeting.
Thank you, Councilor Cheney. Go right ahead.
My second item tonight is the Weirs Railroad Bridge, and I don't know how to go about talking to DOT about transferring that bridge to us, repair it and transfer it to us. Who should do that? I mean, I presume it's staff, but.
So I think you're talking about the wooden bridge over the railroad tracks, not necessarily the railroad bridge. So that was a subject of a DOT public hearing that was held in this room, and I know Councilor Cheney attended and spoke. And the concern of residents in that neighborhood. I should back up. The DOT plan is that they're going to dismantle and discontinue that bridge somewhere in the very near future, the next couple of years, for safety reasons and the fact that they don't want to absorb the maintenance cost on it. Concern of neighbors in that area is that in the summertime, when the entrance down closer to the Lobster in the Rough weather vane property is closed to vehicular traffic, there would then only be one way in and out, and would be down Centenary Ave, down by the marina and the Aqua Lounge, the bar there. And they're encouraging DOT to maintain the bridge and keep it as an operating structure. It's certainly something staff and I can have conversations with folks at DOT. Our big concern is really the condition in which we would want to accept ownership of the bridge. And again, trying to represent the city's interest in a state-owned bridge right now, we would like to take it over if that is the direction we would recommend to go, with the bridge being in rebuilt condition with a lifespan of X, not taking it over as, well, it's still passable now and it passed the inspection this season. We'd be happy to turn it over to you. And then all of a sudden we've got a money pit in that bridge. So if that, we're happy to have that conversation at the staff level and relay that to the appropriate people at DOT, and actually probably bring a letter, draft a letter to have the council, sign off on it and authorize us to send a letter on the city's behalf. But that would probably be the synopsis of our recommendation, understanding the residents' concerns, but understanding we don't want to take over something that is going to be a maintenance issue right out of the gate.
I did attend the hearing here, and two comments I would make. One, the last time the bridge was reconstructed was 50 years ago. So apparently if we get it rebuilt, it should last us 50 years. And I agree with the manager that we should not take a bridge that could potentially cost us money, unusual amounts of money in any short term. One of the comments that one of the two gentlemen from DOT made that night in front of Counselor, our governor's counselor, one of them said, "I'm suspicious of the money we've set aside for this project." And he said, "It's $400,000. He then said, "We're talking about rebuilding the far end that everybody knows about down by Aquamarine. We're going to enlarge that and fix it and make it better. And we're going to fix the one by the restaurant there, whatever, Weather Vane, I think." So I think they're thinking they're going to put money into the two crossings. And I think they should take that money and put it into the bridge and let us 50 years from now, some of the younger folks here can take some heat for it needing repairs, but I won't be here. So in any case, I guess that's what I'm asking that we instruct the manager to do, is to approach the state about restoring the bridge to good condition, but the best condition. And then we would consider turning it over. And I certainly would, at whatever appropriate point, move that the council instruct the manager to draft a letter to DOT outlining our position and conditions.
So it sounds like the first step is an internal discussion within the city before we get to the point of having a letter drafted and signed off on.
Seems to me.
Is that what you said, Scott?
Yeah, we can put together some bullet points for your staff of what we would include. And if there's consensus for us to draft a letter that represents that position, we'd be happy to do so.
I think that's a good first step. Okay, good.
Two more and I'll quit. I apologize. I've had several folks over the last half dozen months or less, a few months, stop me or call me or whatever and complain about the conversion from MetroCast to Atlantic Broadband, and recently the loss of their email service for a period of days, including one woman who claimed her business was very negatively impacted. The particular gentleman I talked to last week called at 10:30 in the morning was left on hold for some substantial amount of time. And everybody I've talked to talks about how long it takes to talk to somebody at Atlantic Broadband. He finally got a call back at 2 o'clock from somebody who helped him. He was disconnected on 3 different times in their chat room and ended up with Diana for 75 minutes to to migrate his Metrocast email account to Atlantic Broadband.
Mm.
And he finally, they originally told him, as I understand it, that he had to get an Atlantic Broadband email address. They ultimately allowed him and his wife to keep their Metrocast email address and use Atlantic Broadband. So my point is, I believe Atlantic Broadband is what's the term they are for a leaseholder? No.
They have a franchise
Franchise.
agreement with the city, but just for cable services.
Not sure what that means, but even for cable services, I'd like to suggest that the council instruct the manager to contact Atlantic Broadband and see if we can improve the service to citizens of Laconia who are having broadband problems, having email problems, whatever. I think a conversation with them, like A, instruct us, and B, encourage them to do better by the folks here.
I empathize with the scenario that Councilor Cheney just outlined, because I know my assistant in my office probably receives 1 or 2 calls a month at a minimum that I'm privy to. And in some cases, most cases, we offer to take down someone's name and follow through directly with our government contact at Atlanta Broadband on their behalf. The simple way, and not trying to get out of it, is the city only controls through our agreement with the franchise agreement, cable services only. So if a company comes in and runs additional wires on the pole for telephone, for email, for internet connection, they are not subject to our franchise agreement, just the cable services alone. No different than Comcast, who's in the city wiring right now. Our oversight is on the cable services. We have, and I believe at least for once for Councilor Cheney, and I believe at least once or twice for Councilor Haynes, reached out through city staff, through John Gardner, to our government contact person and said, hey, we know our franchise agreement doesn't cover this, but this person's having these ongoing email problems. Their account's down. They can't get anyone to respond, and it's impacting their life. Can you get a hold of them? And to my knowledge, each time we've made that call, the folks from Atlantic Broadband have responded to the party. It's not something we should do. It's something we're happy to do, but it really is a regulatory issue. It's my understanding through the Public Utilities Commission for the enforcement about lack of response, lack of being able to reach a live person and get issues like this troubleshot. So we can certainly assist and make that phone call, but as far as the enforcement, when we have a public hearing on a franchise renewal agreement, it's about the quality of the TV reception channels, the amount of time that they've been not available, people's ability to call and get service for cable or exchange a remote control and those types of things. Unfortunately, it doesn't extend to broadband, telephone, email, and these companies are well aware of that. So we assist where we can. Happy to take this person's name and number and get it on our radar and get it to them that, we're tracking these things, and our contact can hear from us, and maybe that helps move things along. But that's the reality of our situation with any franchise renewal company, is strictly on the cable.
Thank you.
Last item. I hope I'm not the only one who read the cybersecurity risk assessment, but I suspect I am. And I guess I'd like to ask the manager his opinion of this report.
The question's been raised. Is it a public document?
Can I take a peek at what you got there?
Yeah, sure.
This is not a public document. This is something that staff were working on, and Counselor Cheney, because he had expressed an interest in the past on getting a better handle on our cybersecurity protocols and protections, that he was copied singularly on a courtesy copy, but it certainly is something we're working on internally, but that's where it should be staying.
Okay.
I apologize profusely. I will talk directly with the manager. I have some concerns.
I'm going to suspend your privileges within the spy agency now as well. Okay. Any council comments continuing on? Oh, you're finished now, Councilor Cheney.
I am.
Yes. Okay. Councilor Felch.
Yes, I attended the Parks and Rec Commission meeting last Monday, and a question was asked about the dedication of the skate park and the gym, which was brought up at one of our meetings before. I'd like to get this moved to one of our committees and start discussion on that as to how we handle those types of things.
I think it was raised by Council Littman when it was first raised a year or so ago, that perhaps establishing criteria. So adding a little structure to how we go about considering naming rights, privileges to various public areas. I think that's a good first step, and then taking the second step. So I would think that it's not finance, it's not public safety, it's not land and buildings per se. Is that operations, I guess, would fall into that? Scott, would you consider that?
Yeah, because it could be varied in nature. So I think
Yeah.
probably, government operations could work towards presenting some guidelines.
So under government operations with Counselor Susie is the chair, along with you, Counselor Felch and Counselor Cheney are on that committee. So perhaps that can be a subject for the committee to discuss and to discuss what criteria we'd be looking for to consider naming something like the skate park or a gym on behalf of someone.
Because they had presented a couple of names for those two items, so I'd like to get that ball rolling.
Okay, I'll call a committee meeting here shortly, and we'll see where we go from there.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Susie. I have a couple of items. Okay. One item I know that both items I've made you aware of. And the first item would be, as I think all of us here and probably all of us also in the room have read over the last few weeks, the situation with Gunstock and the ins and outs going that's been taking place all over the place. And I look here at the city of Laconia being the number one, basically city, and also the main contributor to the Belknap County operations funds and here and that. And all I was going to ask the council and get some input from, I've talked to a couple of councilors who agree with me, but I'd like to see maybe if there's a position the council would take and offer a resolution support the Gunstock commissioners, and that they maintain the present form of
It's not, it's the delegation.
The commissioners that are operating Gunstock. So your letter would be, if I hear you correctly, in support of the commissioners as they defend themselves or advocate on their behalf
Yeah, 'cause
of the delegation.
Right, I've seen a lot of letters, I've seen numbers of petitions, and I think we should support that, okay? We're the governing body of the city, we represent the residents of the city, and I think if we looked about, and the ones I've talked to, and some of my other city councilors that I've had a chance to, would support something that way. And I mentioned it to you, I know I gave you a call, and I think it'd be a wise thing, okay? I mean, I think it's good. I'm really proud of this, the Gunstock area. I think it's fantastic. What they plan on doing in the future, that's up, they can present that and see where it goes from there. But I wouldn't want to see it change from anything that's been that way since, I think if I remember right, my mother-in-law told me it was built during the time of WPA program and all this.
In the 1930s, yeah.
This is
1932 or
awesome.
34.
I mean, it's just a wonderful situation. I wouldn't want to see it do anything else.
So perhaps you would consider drafting some sort of document that the counselors could consider and take a look at it at some point and see if
Okay.
it's something
I
that.
mean, if any other councilors have any questions about that or? Henry?
I agree. I'd like to see us go on record with respect to not undermining the benefits that the area has provided us, and make sure that our delegation that represents Laconia knows the interest of the council here.
So I'll work with you, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, and put something together.
Sure.
Okay. And the second item I had involves a state school. Okay. And I'm really concerned over the property. Naturally, well, who knows when or how it's going to be sold and everything else like that. But I've had discussion with the city manager and some of the city councilors. In fact, the city council really, unless, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but really has no say or authority on how that land is going to be used once it's purchased by some person, developer, company, whoever it is. We'll leave it all up to our zoning board or our planning board. What I get concerned about is that we have 270 plus acres, give or take, that is the prime future and the growth of the city. And here we are as a city council, the elected body that represents all the citizens. And we would have no input unless I'm reading it wrong. And my request would be, I know at first I was going to request that the city council set up a special city commission or city committee of the city council to help represent the city into that avenue. But in talking to the city manager and also Councilor Cheney, who represents that area, at this time, it's probably best if we would maybe ask the city manager and maybe the rest of the council would concur to check with the city attorney and see what is, looking at all the different things, what can or can't we do? I want to make sure we're doing something correctly.
I think it's a fair point. I think we, as you know, we're able to have a resolution passed by the executive council, and
Correct.
you know, it's an addendum, I guess, to the contract that they approved with CBRE to market the property and market it for sale. So there is strong as language as I guess you could have, requiring that CBRE works collaboratively with the city of Laconia as they work to market this program and ultimately consummate a sale. I'm not quite sure what more we can do, but I'm certainly would be open to looking for other opportunities so that we can influence the development of it. And it's certainly consistent with what I think the residents of the city would like to see occur there.
Right. I was brought up to speed on one thing as far as the zoning, that it's a performance. That was the right word. Somebody, performance zone. So you have to have 2 acres minimum to build anything in that area. Okay. Or you go in front of the zoning board and get waivers or whatever else you want. Then it goes to the planning board. Well, I think that's a good process. Those are all appointed boards by us. Okay. But again, we're the elected officials of the city. And I'm wondering if that being such a critical part of the growth of this city, so critical, okay, that there should be something someone overlooked from the city council. And I'm not saying they can or can't be, but I would like to ask the city manager, to ask the city attorney, maybe look into our charter, into the laws, and see if there's something that we should be just checking out. That's all.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we did some of that already when we talked about what we could do in order of trying to request that the executive council vote down or amend, and how to best approach that. And part of that discussion was the resolution to ask that we be included. And I think any realtor and future developer would realize that they need the cooperation of the city and would want to vet their proposals prior to going too far down the road and investing too much money. Legally, I'm not aware of anything, and I can double check again with legal counsel, but that the city council would have any oversight on that. We don't own the land. We're not selling the land. And you don't approve development sites. That's the job of the planning board. The zoning on there right now, for the most part, or for all of it, is either RR1, rural 1, or RR2, meaning 1 acre or 2 acre minimum lot sizes to keep the rural character there. The performance zone is an overlay on top of that, meaning with a fully vetted, and I'll look to Dean to see if I get anything wrong and he can give me a high sign, but it's basically with a fully vetted site plan that meets certain criteria and intent and ties in with the character in the neighborhood and components of the master plan, that there's an opportunity for the planning board, again, looking at a plan in its entirety, to approve something that is different than RR1 and RR2. And that's where we have the control. And any type of plan there, there's times we have developers come in and they sit down with Dean and his staff and they try to kick the tires and say, can this work and that work? And they do work behind the scenes so that when any proposal comes public, as it would have to at the planning board level, you know, they realize that this kind of works within the framework of our land use regulations right now. So while you don't have specific authority, I would be willing to believe that if there was strong opposition on a fully presented and developed proposal from the council to the planning board, that they would certainly take that into condition, because I'll give you an example. If somebody came in and put a proposal that met the criteria of RR1 and RR2 and had the I's, you know, dotted and the T's crossed, the planning board, in theory, can't arbitrarily reject a plan like that. Under the performance zoning, they have all kinds of leeway and discretion in rejecting plans, because that's how that language is structured, of intent and character and feel and master plan, and does it enhance the city. So there is that protection. I did suggest to Councilor Susi that I believe the Lakeshore Redevelopment Commission, which still exists and is still meeting, is a perfectly appropriate place to help vet this. And I believe, and I haven't spoken to the chair, George Bald, but I know Councilor Cheney has been part of some of those meetings. I know Mayor Engler has attended some non-public sessions. I believe Mayor Hosmer has, when certain things are being vetted. Councilor Hamel, so they've got the ability already with that commission to go in non-public and invite whoever they choose to. Now we need to, you know, walk the line of not having too many counselors there at once for it not being a city meeting. But I would think a mayor and a counselor or two counselors could certainly be included in any vetting between CBRE and someone they might be bringing to the table. That commission has so much institutional knowledge and has been working on this and does, you know, done the environmentals in the ground and the buildings and done the wetlands delineations and 27 things I'm missing, Councilor Cheney. And we also have two appointments to there that the city council made. So we have Peter Spanos and Chris Shumway are appointed as Laconia representatives there anyway. And there's two gentlemen from neighboring communities in Guilford and Meredith who also sit on there. So I believe that is a perfect place to vet that for a number of reasons. And when something does go public, the performance zone is not a black and white, and there's plenty of opportunity for the council to weigh in, both in the commission level and that at any kind of public hearing level that may come before the city planning board.
Thank you. Councilor Susi, go right ahead.
Question, and this is probably more for Dean than you, but either way, is there, I'm not sure if it's the right thing to do or not, but is there any way that the council could be made aware of anybody coming to the planning board wanting to do anything in that property?
I would say that when an application is submitted, absolutely it becomes 100% public and we can share those documents with you. A lot of times something comes in and again, they want a little give and take. They want a tire kicking. They want to say, what do you think if we propose this? And there's some sharing of information and ideas that just happens at a staff level. And everywhere that I've been involved in local government, those have stayed confidential because the developer who's kicking the tires and determining what they may or may want to do with the site, or whether they haven't formally bought it yet, but they're coming in to try to figure out, they don't necessarily want to tip their hand. So I believe that we need to keep that level of communication with developers close to the vest to protect them at their request. But certainly anytime anything gets submitted as a formal application, it is 100% a public document.
Thank you. I'm still not satisfied, but that's all right. Thank you.
Any other council comments? How about committee reports or liaison reports this evening? Let's move along to number 19, which is citizens' request to comment on current agenda items. Any items on tonight's agenda that you'd like to speak to? Now would be the appropriate time, both in person and online. It is, I'm sorry, yes, it is on the agenda. It is item 22A, might be the last thing that we address on unfinished business tonight. I may drop it to the end, but certainly you can speak to that now if you like. Absolutely, yeah. Thanks for your patience.
My name is Phyllis Shoemaker. I'm a resident of Ward 4 and have been a resident for the past 46 years. I'm here tonight because I was concerned about the loss of 18 parking spaces. Last Friday, I attempted to go to All My Life Jewelers. I drove through town. Every parking space on Main Street was taken, also on Canal Street. I ended up going to the municipal parking lot and parking on the far side closest to Laconia Savings Bank. At that time, I imagined like 18 parking spaces gone. I think to give 18 parking spaces to another entity out of that lot is a slap in the face to all of the businesses that exist in downtown Laconia. They've managed to survive through COVID. Some have, some haven't, but the ones that are still there, parking is a premium. And if you have to give 18 parking spaces, I believe it should be in this lot here because the businesses downtown need your support. They need those parking spaces. For me, it was a toss-up whether I was going to go to that store because I had to park all the way across, like I said, closest to the bank. The only on-street parking that was available was in front of Laconia Savings Bank on Pleasant Street. Everything else was taken up. And this was like 2 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. It's very busy downtown. And I think it's setting a precedent also to give those parking spaces to a private developer.
Thank you very much for your comments. Anyone online, Mr. Smith?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item number 20, city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be extremely brief tonight. Court Street Bridge is open. Okay, I got a few more words. Still doing some work in and around the sidewalks there, so there's going to be some activity, and we'll get the base wearing course. The road's going to ride great for the winter. We'll wait till that settles and do the final paving there in the spring. Most of our projects are wrapping up. If they haven't already wrapped up, it might be in and around sidewalks and raising structures, but for the most part, we are done with construction for the season. On the economic development report, the numbers that are in front of you for September show everything in the state from county, Laconia, Concord, Manchester, all give or take right around the 2.5% unemployment rate range. So again, very full employment. Second page of that report shows that inflation still continues to be hot. So the inflation number for October came in over 6% at 6.2. So we've had 5 months in a row of inflation running at 5% or higher. Our annualized number, and we're 10 months out of 12 through the year, is at 4.25%. A couple of items not included in there. Tax bills, while we're talking about great news like Court Street Bridge being open, tax bills are going in the mail tomorrow with a due date of December 23rd. I am letting you know that I will be reappointing Joan LaRue to the Personnel Advisory Board. Joan has served in that role since 2015. She works locally here at Bank of New Hampshire, and we appreciate her service. Reminding council, we do have an on-site meeting and public hearing at the end of Eastman Shore Road South coming up on December 4th, a Saturday morning at 10 a.m. It's one of those things that a few of you have experienced in the past. If you've had some longevity in the council where you have to physically go out and be in view at the location. So it'll be right at the very end of Eastman Shore Road South. I will remind you between now and then, but we need a quorum there, and the recommendation would be that we open a public hearing to talk about a discontinuance of that portion of the road at the end, and then recess the public hearing so that we can continue it at a future meeting here at nighttime, and anybody can have the chance to continue to comment there. After I've had conversations with staff and received their input, I've made the decision to not hold the city's annual holiday party as an in-person event this year. If you look at the cases that are happening in New Hampshire and some surrounding states, we are pretty much at our highest level in a long time. And there was an interesting blurb in the New York Times a map article that was even mentioning that several states, it was Vermont, New Mexico, and New Hampshire specifically mentioned that have high vaccination levels are seeing surges right now. So in looking at our rate, at our hospitalization rate is very high right now in the state. As I said a little bit earlier in the meeting, I think our staff have done a very good job of keeping people safe, and we've kept buildings isolated for the most part. To the staff in there, I think trying to bring everybody together and mingle and have that opportunity for cross-pollinating, and then bringing in the other folks who are invited to the luncheon, which are all our board and commission members, which I know we rely heavily on, and we appreciate all that they do. It just didn't seem that bringing 150 people into the community center in close proximity made sense for a lot of reasons. If there's an opportunity that we can reschedule something early next year and have a celebration at that point, it's really about the camaraderie and recognizing whether it's board and commission members or employees who hit milestone anniversaries for the city, and seeing people and thanking people. The turkey dinner is good, but it's really about getting the people together. And I feel that if we put it on hold for a little bit, we can do a better job and do it safely. So
Thank you very much, Mr. Myers.
happy to take any questions anybody may have.
Counselor Felch.
Yes, I don't know if they're done on Elm Street or not, but if they are not, I'd like to see that straightened out a little bit instead of being like it is for the winter. It's pretty rough patch job to be driving all the way down a main road in Laconia. So I'm hoping they can smooth that out somewhat before they leave it for the winter.
Let me look into that and I'll get you an answer in the next day or so.
Thank you. Counselor Hamel.
Two things. Court Street Bridge. I had the opportunity to go over it today. I didn't go over it when they paved it, but it looks like, I don't know, maybe Wes can clarify it too. Looks like they're grinding off. They were grinding something off the bridge, so I'm assuming it was pavement that was put on. They were grinding that off today. And also the entrances on each side to the bridge are not very good. And that area before and after the bridge is not very good. And I agree with Tony on Elm Street. It's terrible. Going up the hill, there's a lot of cross cuts across the road. There's patches around manholes that are higher than the road. So that wouldn't be a good situation for the winter.
And again, I know we're still working in and around the bridge itself, so let me check on the status of those things you've raised, and I'll get back with you in a day or so.
Okay, so I'm assuming they're going to do some more paving?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Counselor Littman.
Wondering, is the December 4th meeting, is there any chance of doing it at a later time?
I think we've already advertised, the posted and it's advertised because we had to mail letters with 30 days notice on this particular item. So it was more than just a 10-day or a 14-day advertising. So if we don't hold it.
I wasn't suggesting that,
Okay.
not that day, just a later time in the day. So, but if you can.
We would have to run up against a whole new 30-day window to change the legal posting of it right now.
It's 10 a.m., right? Sure.
10 a.m. And I'm happy to meet you over there, Councilor Littman, and obviously any comments that are made or will be recorded in the minutes, and then the public hearing continues there. So there will be no decision made there.
Thank you. Any other council comments on the city manager's report? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move along to item number 21, which is new business. This is a 21A request for a building permit on a private road, 133 Layton Avenue South. Scott, could you lead us through this just a little bit?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is similar to one that we had a few weeks ago where it actually was a Class 6 road. This is truly a private road. So the reference there, this will require on the second page a filing of a document with the county registrar that attaches to the property that someone acknowledges that they're building on a private road, and therefore it's recorded. And I believe this is a house that there was a fire at, and they are rebuilding a house that already existed there on a same or similar footprint. So it just needs your approval in order for the city to issue the building permit.
All right, so I'll be looking for a motion to authorize the city manager to sign on behalf of the city the notice of limits of responsibility and liability regarding property abutting a private road for our property located at 133 Layton Avenue South, tax map 33, lot 7, and authorize the code department to issue a building permit for the same property. So made by Counselor Cheney, seconded by Counselor Felch. Any further discussion on this matter?
I was just wondering, this being a private road, is this a road that's looking at being a public road at some point?
No, it is not. It actually will be the subject of the one that we're being asked to discontinue, starting with the public hearing on December 4th.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, then we'll call the question here. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hands. It's 5 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. Moving along to item number 21B, which is temporary traffic order 2021-18 for the holiday parade and request to waive all city fees associated with the event. The holiday parade temporary traffic order is being presented to the council under new business as there are significant changes from prior years' temporary traffic orders. Celebrate Laconia, the organizer of the parade, is requesting the council to consider waiving all city fees with the event. Right now, be looking for a motion to approve temporary traffic order 2021-18 for the holiday parade to be held on November 28th, 2021, as presented, and to approve the request to waive all city fees associated with the event. So made by Counselor Felch. Is there a second? Seconded by Counselor Susie. Is there further discussion on this? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. That's 5 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. Item number 21C, 2021 second half sewer warrant per chapter 189-50C, collection of a flat rate sewer accounts are collected by the tax collector. They'll be looking to collect $143,630. Staff recommendation from Lindsay Allen is to approve and sign the 2021 second half sewer warrant. So I'll be looking for a motion right now to approve the 2021 second half sewer warrant. So made by Counselor Cheney, seconded by Counselor Lippman. Any further discussion on the sewer warrant this evening? One at a time. All right, seeing none, all those in favor of this motion, please indicate by raising your hands. That's 5 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. Item number 21D, which is approval of a revised city welfare guidelines. Counselor Lippman.
I'd like to ask that I think it's great that we're revising them, but I'd like to have the opportunity to have a little bit more in-depth time with the policies and the guidelines and actually refer to committee for that work.
I think that's very wise. It's a substantive document and there are some substantive changes, I think. I think it'd be wise to continue to discuss this. I guess my only question would be, and maybe directed at either Mr. Smith or the city manager, if this is delayed as we wordsmith and maybe talk about some of the changes, would that negatively impact the operation of the welfare department right now?
I don't believe it will.
I'm sorry, if that's your only answer, we can really. I know.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't believe it will.
Okay.
The items that are the welfare function is working really well right now. These are kind of some fine tuning items that I think would be beneficial in the long term, but it can definitely wait while you take the time needed to review this.
Okay, thank you very much. And thanks for your work on this. I realize it is a very significant document. So why don't we assign this to which committee, Councilor Lippman?
It could go to finance.
Okay.
If the other councils were comfortable with that.
Is it all right with other councilors?
Yeah.
Seems to be. So we're going to assign this to the finance committee. Mr. Myers.
So for those of you who have printed copies, could I please ask that you pull them out of your agenda packets and you hang on to them so we don't have to kill many, many more trees. And for those of you who are coming to a meeting and either don't have a printed copy tonight and want it, let us know. Or if you're fine with us just sending you the link and working off a tablet or an iPad, we can do that as well. So save the trees.
Mr. Myers, I come from a long lineage of paper makers. You know, I will though, save it this time. Go right ahead, Counselor Lippman.
So I just, the process that we work through the internal control document in terms of kind of going through it in detail is kind of what I have in mind.
Yep. So I think if you look at this document, if you got the color printed, it's got a red line version so you know exactly what the changes are. So as you go through it, highlight where you've got, and we can focus on those in areas that just seem routine or wordsmithing. We can skip over. We can take it however it works for the committee.
Do we need a motion to table or to move to a committee?
Motion to table tonight would be in order.
To be a motion to table by Counselor Phelps, seconded by Counselor Lippman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. The item is tabled. I'm sure there's no discussion on that. So item number 21E, which is to amend the city code chapter 235 zoning to update section 41A accessory dwelling unit to eliminate the zoning board of adjustment from the approval process and amending certain criteria to amend table 1, table of permitted uses. Mr. Myers, could you lead us through this just a bit?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So this, as you just read, would be to amend the section on the city's accessory dwelling units, which we adopted several years back. This language went through the master plan steering committee, I believe is where it was started. So it was vetted there. It went to the planning board where there's full approval. And tonight you're just merely moving this forward, waiving a reading, moving a first reading and scheduling the public hearing in 2 weeks. And if you want to get a little deeper into what exactly some of the highlights are, Dean is here and he certainly is able to speak to it.
Terrific. Counselor Lippman, do you have a question?
I'm in support of the accessory dwelling units concept. I do have some questions that I'd like to be able to ask in terms of taking it from, and I'm not opposed to the approach of moving it from a formal process to an administrative process. But I guess just some broad guidelines, making sure that we're all comfortable with the parameters in which the administrative decisions will be made is kind of what I want to spend a little time on with, and I don't know if we want to dive into it tonight or not, but that's kind of my interest on this one.
We're going to table this again.
I mean, I guess up to other folks, but just to give you an example of one of the things, like in terms of proportionality to existing an existing dwelling and like the 1,000 square foot limit on a building, is it, how is that calculated? Because you could build sort of a 2-story thing and get a 2,000 square foot building. So I'm just, again, I think if we have the parameters that we're all sort of more developed, I'd be more comfortable passing as is, so that speak, excuse me.
Would it be helpful if staff prepared a framework of a guideline, as this is the intent of nothing's going to, factor for 100% of the scenarios that might come forward, but this would be the parameters that would be intended to be used in an administrative decision?
Yeah, I think that's what I'd like to see a little bit more detail on.
So why don't we flesh this out? My suggestion would be to move this to the public hearing. You can hold the public hearing, take public input. You can table it at that point. There's nothing, if we're not satisfied with the information that's presented, but move forward. At least that gives you the opportunity to get the public input.
Sure.
And there's nothing that says you can't recess a public hearing and reopen it again 2 weeks later, or whether you just close the public hearing and don't take action and you have 2 more weeks to deliberate before the council votes.
So you're suggesting to pursue both?
I would move it into, at least that gives you the opportunity to have public comment in 2 weeks. And if you're ready with whatever documents we're able to prepare, great. And if you want to table it in 2 weeks after the public hearing, you've got that ability as well. So there's no rush on it.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Susie, do you have a question? No. All right, so we have a series of 3 motions here. The first one is to make a move, looking for a motion to move to waive the reading of this ordinance in its entirety and to read by title only. Counselor Cheney makes the motion, seconded by Counselor Felch. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor indicate by raising your hands. It's 5 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. Second motion I'll be looking for is to move the first reading of ordinance 2021-235-41:A, amending the accessory dwelling unit ordinance and amending table 1, table of permitted uses. So made by Counselor Cheney, seconded by Counselor Felch. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. That's 5 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. And finally, we're looking for a motion to move to schedule a public hearing on December 13th during the regular city council meeting to gather input prior to any action being taken. So made by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Cheney. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'd ask, did you have?
I'm just gonna,
Didn't want to be too fast there. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hands. It's 5 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. Okay. Let's move to a public hearing. So we're going to move along to unfinished business right now. I would like to take item 22A, which is proposed lease agreement with EGM Holdings LLC. I intend to recuse myself. I'd like to move that to the end of unfinished business at that point in time, if that's okay. And tonight's Counselor Pro Tem, Counselor Hamel, will take it at that point. So item number 22B will be the first item under unfinished business, and this is the Housing and Community Development Program, the Housing and Community Development Plan. Earlier this evening, we heard from Donna Lane in regards to the goals of the plan. And right now I'll be looking for a motion to move to adopt the Housing and Community Development Plan as presented. So made by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Cheney. Is there any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. That's 5 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. Moving on to item number 22C, which is the second reading of ordinance 2021-149-14 to amend city code 149-14 ambulance fees. Current language is stricken. There's some cleanup language there. And it's the staff recommendation from Chief Biotti is to recommend removing Lakes Region General Hospital from City Code 149-14 ambulance fees. This is a series of 3 motions. We'll be looking to waive a reading of this ordinance in its entirety to read by title only. So made by Counselor Cheney, seconded by Counselor Felch. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'd ask all those in favor to indicate by raising your hands. 5 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. That was you, Bob? Counselor Hammer, yes, okay. Second motion is to move a second reading of ordinance 2021-149-14 ambulance fees. So made by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Hamel. Any further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. 5 votes in the affirmative, that motion passes. And finally, I'd be looking for a motion to approve ordinance 2021-149-14 ambulance fees. So made by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Hamel. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand. 5 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes as well. Thank you, councilors. Under item number 22D right now, which is the second reading of Resolution 2021-18 pertaining to establishing Plantation and Colonial Roads as emergency lanes. Right now, I'll be looking to move to waive a reading of this motion, looking for a motion to move to waive a reading of this motion in its entirety and to read by title only. So made by Counselor Cheney, seconded by Counselor Susie. Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of, oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, go right ahead.
I'm just wondering, as a preliminary, could we ask the manager to sort of outline what the record is from the city's standpoint? Because I'm not sure that that's been fully appreciated by some of the testimony we heard earlier.
Thank you for the question. So we had a meeting on this over a month ago, in which the council took some action to move this to an emergency lane status until May of 2025, I believe. And after the meeting, our Public Works Director, Wes Anderson, rightly pointed out that we need to schedule this to a true public hearing and give an advertisement. So everything we've done is followed the law, and we had this as the first reading 2 weeks ago. We advertised it, moved it to the public hearing tonight, and taking action on it tonight. So from that sense, we're there. The intent of the council, in conjunction with saying they would move this and keep it to emergency lane designation until spring of 2025, was to allow the city to legally continue to maintain the road with the services they have right now. Keep it passable, handle the plowing, handle the grading after heavy storms, sand where needed, and have trash pickup continue to occur. And in conjunction with that, it was asking the neighbors to try to identify a couple of people to come in and work with the city about approaches and where we can find some compromise versus the city accepting the road. So legal counsel has looked at that. We're on very solid legal ground. We haven't denied, and we've presented information that included a memo from a staff person saying we've been maintaining it, so therefore it is. But unfortunately, a staff person writing a memo doesn't necessarily carry the weight of the city council accepting it, or what the planning board did back in the 70s when they put a hold on this and said that. In reference to the Supreme Court case that we've been maintaining the road since it's been built, from a purely technical standpoint, the road was never built. The road was roughed in and development occurred, but we have not been maintaining a road that has been built, and it doesn't automatically trigger a situation where if we've done it for a while, we're required to. But I believe all of our meetings at the Weirs Community Center and the intent of the city council is to work through a solution that's probably not going to be perfect, that everyone's going to love, but hopefully there's some equity to it, and that will be the city's intent. And this provides protection of guarantee of services unless the council were to take a different vote somewhere in the future before May of 2025. Guarantees those services as they've been receiving them basically for the last number of years to continue. And if and when we're ready to do something different, we will. And if for some reason we're not, which I certainly hope we would, you can always extend this further down the road. But the intent is to get with the folks in short order, start meeting to take some of the uncertainty out and see how we can craft a compromise.
Yes, I thought that was important context to
Likewise.
discussion.
Okay, any further, go, Councilor Felch.
I'd just like to note that it was the intent of the residents of that area to have the road approved as is. And the only reason we're doing this is because I felt we didn't have the votes for that. And hopefully we can get something solved before the 3 years.
Thank you, Councilor Felch. Any further discussion on the motion? Or actually in the waiving of the reading? Yes.
I support what Councilor Felch is saying. I think that in terms of the desire to work something out quicker so that there's certainty for the residents of those roads, while at the same time making sure that there's certainty with respect to the services that are being delivered as we're working out is where we're trying to get to. And in terms of speaking with the manager about this issue, I think that, I can see where there's opportunity to come up with a compromise that is workable and respects the longstanding services that have been received and protects the rest of the taxpayers from a situation that wouldn't necessarily be supported if it went all the way legally.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion that's on the table? Seeing none, all those in favor of this motion, please indicate by raising your hands. It's 5 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. Secondly, be looking for a motion to move the second reading of Resolution 2021-18 pertaining to establishing plantation and colonial roads as emergency lanes under RSA 231:59-big A. So made by Councilor Phelps, seconded by Councilor Cheney. Is there any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hands. That's 5 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. And finally, be looking for a motion to approve Resolution 2021-18 pertaining to establishing plantation and colonial roads as emergency lanes until May 1st, 2025, under RSA 231:59-A. So made by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Susie, it's Counselor by Counselor Littman. Any further discussion, Counselor Susie?
I have a question. Does that mean that as of May 1st, 2025, the roads will be taken as accepted?
No.
No, okay. Okay, I just want to make sure that we get that on record. It's not.
Fair enough,
Okay,
right,
thank you.
correct. Any other questions or discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hands. 5 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes as well. Under item 22E, which is a request to schedule a public hearing on December 13th, 2021, during the regular council meeting pertaining to the redistricting map. At the November 2nd, 2021 municipal election, the voters voted in favor of allowing the council the authority to adjust the ward boundary lines. That question passed 1,837 to 618. The city is required to review and adjust its ward boundaries if needed after the release of the 10-year federal census data. Attached to all of our documents tonight is the redistricting map and the narrative. City manager recommends scheduling a public hearing on December 13th, 2021. This approach would have the city council set boundaries after a duly noticed public hearing and with 2/3 majority vote threshold. Okay, so right now I'd be looking for a motion to move to schedule a public hearing on December 13th, 2021 during the regular council meeting pertaining to Article 1 of the city charter to gather public input prior to any action being taken. So made by Counselor Cheney and seconded by Counselor Susie. Is there any further discussion on this motion? Counselor Littman.
So I think that the map that's going to be presented is the one that's been available all along. No changes to that. Is that correct?
There are no changes here. That's been in the front page of the newspaper. It was posted on the homepage of the city website. There were large copies available in all 6 polling locations. And we had a copy in the lobby of the city of here in City Hall for about a week or 2 leading up to the election.
Any further discussions? Satisfied?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion that's on the floor right now, please indicate by raising your hands. That's 5 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. So, in just a moment here, I'd like to transition and recuse myself on the matter that's still on the agenda. Oops. And Mayor Pro Tem Hamel will take the reins. Just a moment to slide out of here. Go and pass that to Cheryl. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you
Thanksgiving.
very much. Thank you. You too, councilors. Happy Thanksgiving. I don't see you or speak with you. Thank you, Cheryl.
Okay, we're on to item 22A. Staff report, November 22nd, 2021. Proposed lease with EJM Holdings and LLC. So there's 4 motions that need to be voted on. The first is to remove this item from the table. Do I have a motion for that? So made by Counselor Littman, seconded by Counselor Susie. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, of removing from the table? Aye, okay. Okay, I moved to waive a reading of the proposed lease with EJM Holdings LLC in its entirety and to read by title only. So a motion made by Counselor Cheney, seconded by Counselor Susie. Any discussion? All those in favor? I move a second reading of the proposed lease with EJM Holdings LLC. Have a motion on that, Counselor Cheney, seconded by Counselor Lippman. Any discussion? All those in favor? And the last motion is I move to approve the proposed lease with EJM Holdings LLC. And I have a motion by Counselor Susie, seconded by Counselor Cheney. Any discussion? Okay,
Lots of discussion.
go ahead.
I called Rusty McClure and spoke with him. One of my first concerns was the location of the parking spaces, taking spaces away from our merchants downtown. I made a proposal. I sent you all a copy of the map to locate all the parking spaces in the city hall parking lot. Rusty's only concern with that was being further away. Well, when you exit the condos from that building, you actually exit on Canal Street from behind the theater. So if you pace off those parking spaces to City Hall parking lot and then pace them off going around the building where Wayfarer is to the Pleasant Street side of the Main Street parking lot, they're within 20 feet difference. They're almost exactly the same. It also would make it a lot easier for our city to maintain those parking spaces where they're all in one spot instead of having some in one, some in another. Because I can tell you, I run an apartment complex and getting people to move, it's not easy. And I knock on doors. I don't think our city employees are going to do that. So along with that, the other problem I have is the amount of the lease. I mean, what do we say it costs us to obtain those parking spaces behind the church per parking space? What's it going to cost us to maintain these parking spaces? I know to plow a parking lot with 18 spaces is going to be $2,000–3,000 every year. So are we making any money on these spaces? Rusty says he's losing money, possibly. This wasn't a deal that's been approved. It was a deal that was made outside of city council. The city council has not voted on anything to do with this yet. And what precedent are we making? Are we going to be leasing parking spaces to anybody that owns property downtown? Are we going to be leasing it for the same price? There's a lot of unanswered questions before we vote on this. That's all I have for right now.
Any other counselors have anything? Counselor Lippman?
Just in your conversations with Rusty McClure, did he come to an agreement with what you had proposed as the spaces, or was it that you talked to him and he said something back? And because kind of where I'm coming from on it is that the Colonial Theater is a once in a generation or lifetime kind of event, and it would have never happened as a completed project without it, which is why I can kind of look past some of the concerns that you mentioned about the sort of the financial of it. I mean, in terms of the spaces and where they're located, is, you know, I feel like there's that arrangement to get the Colonial built was an exceptional situation that you know, we were lucky not to end up with an albatross in the middle of downtown, which would have hurt all the businesses. So where the spaces are located is, if the party, if you will, is in agreement with the spaces, is less of a concern to me. But I think in terms of you know, supporting honoring the agreement that was laid out there is I think important in terms of parties that want to enter into development with the city of Laconia on other projects. As to the concern that was brought up by one residents about the availability of spaces, I think one of the things we do need to do downtown is to convert the city parking lot and take advantage of the 80 spaces, which have been largely fallow at this point in terms of making more of the city parking lot short-term parking and some of the street-facing parking, more short-term parking, and have some of the longer-term parkers who are around to use a lot that it's a few more steps, more than 20, but to be able to use those to free up more parking to deal with the concern raised by residents of being able to get, utilize the local businesses. It's important to have that turnover. So I think we have a property to change the character of the municipal lot to more short-term parking. And that's why I kind of support what's on the table here, that I think we can do both things, which is, provide for the spaces and utilize the parking spaces we've purchased in a way that opens up more spaces for the downtown.
So as far as the parking spaces, where they're located, his only concern was distance. So I don't see why not move them further away from our Main Street parking, where if we fill up all those businesses on Pleasant Street and all these other businesses that are downtown, we need the parking downtown.
Isn't that a good situation?
What's that?
Isn't that a good situation?
Yeah. And as far as anything else, the only other concern he had was the length of the lease. He did want it longer, and it is 50 years instead of 40 like we had proposed before.
Councilor Susie.
Two things, Henry, to come up to one of your points. I think the ones who are parking downtown long-term should use the parking at St. Joe's.
That's what I was advocating.
And
Yes.
then, because I think that's great for them, okay? Secondly, I think we did make some accommodations and we moved the parking around that was originally proposed to the back of the City Hall parking lot, if I remember right. And we also moved some of the ones over on Pleasant Street. So I think we've been accommodating, and instead of, it went from 100 years to 50 years, right? Or 99 years to 50 years. So that there, and I think we also asked Mr. Councilor Hamel with his discussions with some of the people to make sure that when we bring up the parking garage and we get that done, that, we do everything we can to help those people move into that area. So I think right now we've got the best that there is to do.
Councilor Cheney.
To Henry's point, I've had conversations with the police chief about parking enforcement, which I think is going to be more important going forward. One of the things that I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist to realize there are services downtown that consume the easy parking spaces all day long. And we don't do a lot towards enforcement. What horrified me was to find out that you can't chalk tires anymore because some court out in the Midwest said it's an illegal search and seizure. So I've asked the chief to propose equipment to do parking enforcement, and we'll be seeing that in their next budget. I have some concerns about the length of the lease. I think the 50 years is a compromise. I tend to agree with Henry that this was a certainly in a generation and probably a lifetime project. And Rusty, I mean, in fairness to him, he bought in and did everything with no guarantees. And now he's asking for some stuff that he asked out of this deal, and I tend to want to work with him. I think we can move some of those spaces to the parking garage. I think they will willingly move to the parking garage. In the meantime, I'm okay with the proposed parking arrangement. Thank you.
Scott, you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I spoke with Rusty. It was either last Tuesday or Wednesday before we published the agenda, because this was the last item that we were waiting on his approval. He didn't share anything with me that he was okay with changing a parking spots, or I wasn't aware that Counselor Felch had a one-on-one conversation. And so I can't speak to what Counselor Felch is saying. I have no reason to doubt him, but I know Rusty and I spoke on Tuesday and Wednesday about the changes in the wordsmithing, and that never came up. And I have been the key contact with Rusty and his team all the way along, and this kind of feels like I was left out of the loop on something. So that concerns me a little bit.
Okay. Just to add 2 more cents. I agree with everybody here. I mean, this project has just been amazing. And everybody you talk to downtown, the business owners and stuff, that their businesses have increased. You go to Hector's on a show night, and they do a discount if you go to a show and a ticket and you go eat there. My wife and I went there, I don't know, it was last Friday or something like that. And the place was mobbed, and everybody's having a good time. And even the other local restaurants around it's good. I mean, this is just going to be a real good catalyst for Laconia. So, just, you got to take some, give you some take. And I think overall, and I agree with what Councilor Cheney said, the risk that Rusty took of putting in, I don't know what he put in, but it's a couple million, maybe more anyway, and not knowing if he was going to have a return. So I think this is a small request. And I agree that once we get the parking garage going, those people are going to want to have covered places. So.
Yeah, in the interim, we can make some changes to the municipal lot to more than replicate the 18 spaces in terms of short-term parking.
The ones right on Beacon Street West, this is what,
Sorry.
the ones right here on Beacon Street West. Okay, there's some people I know that work across the street, they park there all day long.
Like in Beacon East.
Beacon East, right, on the diagonals.
Yeah.
That should be,
Make those 2 hours.
those should be all 2 hours.
More than 18 there.
But even then, within the lot, because some people don't feel comfortable doing that parking there, I think we could expand the short-term parking in the municipal lot, and we should try to get some use out of the spaces that we've purchased.
Now, the only way you're going to do that is by reducing the time in there.
Right.
Make a move.
Exactly.
Counselor.
So I totally agree with doing stuff downtown like that. Canal Street, in my opinion, should be no more than a half an hour parking, because most of those businesses are in and out. But with that said, one of the concerns supposedly with the location of the parking spaces was distance. Well, the parking garage is a whole lot further away than either the Pleasant Street or Main Street parking or City Hall parking lots. So I don't really get the issue of putting them all together. That way they're in one spot, they're easy to maintain, and they're about the same distance as they would be if they're in Pleasant Street.
If I could, if the manager had a conversation with Rusty, because he's been the prime contact, and they agreed on a set of parking spaces where there's agreement, not that we're telling them, because I think that's kind of where we're at in the negotiation. I'd be okay with that. We could pass this, and if the manager could come up with something that accommodates different, that's acceptable to both parties, then I'd be okay with that. But I think we ought to move on this tonight.
Well, what I recall is the original agreement. You had discussion, everybody had discussion, and we asked the city manager to go back and see if there was something better that could come up with. And I believe there was a walkthrough downtown with a few owners of businesses downtown, and they're the ones that came up with this what we have in front of us right now. Scott?
If the council wants to approve this tonight with the request to me that I have a conversation with Rusty McClear and see if we can, if he wants to move the 8 spaces from the Main Street lot over to here, and if he's fine with that, maybe he just hadn't visualized them and see the concern. But if you want to make that as a contingent upon the approval, that I at least ask him the question and he can have the final say. And if he says no, then the spaces would remain how they were identified by that working group that you just identified, Councilor Hamel.
Okay. I think we should just go on the motion and You know, I mean, if Rusty wants to do something in the future, then that can be brought back to the council. So there's a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor? Those opposed? A motion passes 4-1.
Counselor Hamel, just in terms of what the manager said, I want to make sure that the record reflects that he could come back with an alternative.
I think the parking garage.
Okay, so I don't know where the mayor went, but I guess I will close the meeting at 9:01.
covered.